The Galactic Military Academy sat on Station 7, a massive metal ring floating in the darkness between three different star systems. For 400 years, this place had trained the best soldiers, pilots, and warriors in the known galaxy. Thousands of species sent their strongest children here. The Academy had rules for everything, forms for everything, procedures that had been tested and perfected over centuries. The Academy had never made a mistake with paperwork, not once in 400 years. Until today. Walked through the long gray corridors of Section 9, her boots making soft sounds on the metal floor. She was small for a human, standing just over 5 feet tall. Her black hair was pulled back in a simple tie, and she wore the standard gray uniform of a new cadet. In her hands, she carried a tablet that showed her assignment. Training Hall 9 Black, Predator Integration Course. Her name was right there on the list. She had checked it 5 times already. The words did not change. Did not know what the Predator Integration Course was. She had looked it up in the Academy database, but the files were classified. All she knew was that her tablet said to go there, so she went. The corridors in Section 9 were different from the rest of the Academy. The lights were dimmer. The air felt heavier. There were fewer people walking around, and the ones she did see moved quickly, their eyes watching everything. She found Training Hall 9 Black at the end of a long hallway. The door was massive, made of thick metal that looked like it could stop a small explosion. There was a scanner beside it that read her identification chip and beeped green. The door slid open with a heavy grinding sound. Stepped inside. The smell hit her first. It was thick and strange, like wet earth mixed with something sharp and metallic. The training hall was enormous, with high ceilings that disappeared into darkness above. Strange equipment lined the walls, things she did not recognize, things that looked dangerous. But it was not the room that made her stop walking. It was the creatures inside it. 12 figures stood in the center of the training hall. They were not human. They were not anything close to human. 3 of them were towering beings that stood nearly 8 feet tall. Their skin was dark green and covered in hard scales. Their arms were long, ending in hands that had 4 fingers each, and every finger had a curved blade growing from it. Their eyes were yellow with thin black slits, like the eyes of snakes. They watched with cold interest. 4 of them were shorter but wider than their heads were covered in thick bone plates that looked like natural armor. Their mouths were filled with teeth designed for crushing. Muscles bulged under their gray skin. They looked like they were built for war. 2 of them were, and these were the strangest of all. They looked almost human in shape, but their skin glowed faintly with orange light, like there was fire burning inside them. Heat rose from their bodies in visible waves. The air around them shimmered. The remaining 3 were species did not recognize. One had 4 arms. One had no visible eyes. One seemed to be covered in living shadow that moved and shifted constantly. All 12 of them turned to look at her. Felt very, very small. In the center of the room, standing apart from the aliens, was a human man. He was older, perhaps 50 or 60 years, with gray hair cut short and a face covered in old scars. He wore a black uniform with medals pinned to his chest. His eyes were hard and sharp. This was Senior Instructor. He had spent 30 years training soldiers. He had commanded ships in 3 different wars. He had a reputation for being impossible to surprise. Right now he looked very surprised. Had been in the middle of speaking when the door opened. His words stopped in his throat. His mouth stayed open for a moment, then closed. He blinked twice. "What?" he said slowly, his voice careful and controlled. "Is she doing here?" One of them made a low, rumbling sound that might have been a laugh. "Is this a joke, Instructor? Did you order entertainment for us?" Another, the largest one, took a step toward. His blade fingers clicked together softly. "She smells like fear, like prey." His heart was beating very fast. She could feel it pounding in her chest, in her ears. Every instinct in her body was screaming at her to run. These creatures were predators, real predators, the kind of beings that evolved to hunt and kill, but did not run. She had learned a long time ago that running did not always save you. Sometimes it just made things worse. Instead, she looked down at her tablet again. She read the words one more time. Then she looked up at Instructor. "Reporting for duty, sir," she said. Her voice was quiet, but it did not shake. Stared at her. Then he looked at his own console, pressing buttons rapidly. His frown grew deeper with each second. "This has to be an error," he muttered. "The Predator class is not for, you should not be here." "My assignment says Training Hall 9 Black," replied. "Predator Integration Course. My name is on the roster." "I can see that," snapped. "What I want to know is how your name got on the roster." Behind, the largest let out another rumbling laugh. He had moved closer without her noticing. She could feel the heat of his breath on the back of her neck. "Does it matter how she got here?" he asked. His voice was deep and rough like stones grinding together. "She is here now. Fresh meat for the Predator class." The other aliens made sounds of agreement. Some of them were laughing, some of them were not. Held up one hand and the room went silent immediately. Whatever these creatures were, they respected him, or feared him, maybe both. "No one touches her," said firmly. "Not until I figure out what happened." The large made a disappointed sound but stepped back. His yellow eyes never left. Walked toward her, his boots heavy on the metal floor. He stopped in front of her and looked down. Up close, she could see that his scars were worse than they appeared from far away. Something had torn across his face long ago, leaving marks that would never heal. "What is your name, cadet?" "Sir." "And what classification are you?" Hesitated. She knew what her classification was. She had carried it for 13 years, but saying it out loud in front of these predators felt dangerous. "Miracle Protocol, sir," she said finally. The room went very quiet. Even the aliens seemed confused. They looked at each other, then waiting for an explanation. Closed his eyes for a moment. When he opened them again, something in his expression had changed. The anger was still there, but now there was something else too. Something that looked almost like sadness. "Miracle Protocol," he repeated softly. "Of course." He turned away from her and walked back to his console. His fingers moved across the screen, pulling up files and forms. "Training is suspended for today," he announced. "Everyone return to your quarters. I need to make some calls." The predators did not argue. They filed out of the training hall one by one, passing by as they left. Most of them ignored her. A few looked at her with curiosity. The large stopped beside her and leaned down until his face was close to hers. "My name is," he said quietly. "Remember it, little human. I have a feeling we will become very familiar with each other." Then he was gone and was alone with Instructor. The old soldier did not look at her. He just kept working at his console, his jaw tight with frustration. "Sir," said carefully, "if I am not supposed to be here, I can leave. I do not want to cause problems." Finally looked at her. His eyes searched her face, looking for something she did not understand. "The Predator class is not like other training programs," he said. "The beings you saw today are apex hunters. They come from planets where survival means killing or being killed. They are trained for missions that no one else can do: infiltration, assassination, operations where there is no backup and no rescue." He paused, letting the words sink in. Humans have served in the Predator class before, but they were soldiers, warriors, people who chose this life and trained for years to be ready for it. He shook his head slowly. "You are not a soldier, cadet. You are a Miracle Protocol survivor. You should be in administrative training, desk work, something safe." Listened without speaking. She had heard words like this before. People always wanted to protect her. People always thought they knew what was best for her. "There has been a mistake," continued. "Someone in processing made an error, Tomorrow, you will be transferred to the correct program. Tonight, you will stay in guest quarters away from the Predator-class barracks." He finally met her eyes again. "Do you understand?" Nodded slowly. "Yes, sir, I understand." But as she turned to leave, she stopped at the door and looked back. "Sir, may I ask one question?" Sighed. "What is it?" "What exactly is the Miracle Protocol?" The instructor was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was softer than before. "It is a classification we created for people who survived things they should not have survived, people who lived through disasters that killed everyone around them." He looked at her with those hard eyes. "People like you, cadet, people who already experienced enough horror for one lifetime." Thought about that. She thought about the things she remembered and the things she tried not to remember. "I see," she said quietly. "Thank you, sir." Then she walked out of Training Hall 9 Black, leaving the instructor alone with his paperwork and his problems. But even as she walked back through the dim corridors of Section 9, could not shake the feeling that this was not over. The Academy had made a mistake, yes. But maybe, just maybe, it was a mistake she was not supposed to walk away from. She did not know it yet, but her life had just changed forever. And so had the Predator class. Instructor did not sleep that night. He sat in his small office on the top floor of the training complex, surrounded by screens and old photographs. A cup of coffee sat on his desk, long cold and forgotten. The only light came from his computer, casting blue shadows across his face. He was reading a file, the same file he had been reading for hours. Subject: age 24. Origin: Earth Colony 3. Remembered 3. Everyone in the galaxy remembered 3. It had been a farming colony built on a cold planet at the edge of human space. The colony had grown quickly, spreading across the frozen landscape in a network of connected domes. At its peak, 2.3 million people had called 3 home: families, children, farmers and teachers and doctors, ordinary people living ordinary lives. Then came the collapse. No one knew exactly what started it. Some said it was a failure in the main atmospheric processor. Others said it was a chain reaction in the heating systems. The official report used words like cascading failure and systematic breakdown, but those were just fancy ways of saying that everything went wrong at once. The domes started failing one by one. The air processors stopped working. The temperature dropped. In some areas, the cold came so fast that people froze where they stood. In others, the air became poison, filled with chemicals that were never supposed to escape their containers. It took 6 hours, just 6 hours for 2.3 million people to die. The rescue ships arrived 3 weeks later. They found a frozen graveyard, bodies everywhere, families huddled together in their last moments, children still clutching toys. The rescue teams had seen war. They had seen disasters, but nothing had prepared them for 3. They searched for survivors for 5 days. They found nothing but death. And then, on the 6th day, they found her. Pulled up the rescue report and read it again, even though he already knew every word. The search team had been checking a small agricultural dome on the edge of the colony. It was far from the main settlement, used for growing experimental crops. No one expected to find anything there. But when they opened the inner door, they found a small room that had been sealed from the inside. The walls were covered with plastic sheets. Strange machines hummed in the corners, built from scrap metal and broken equipment. In the center of the room, wrapped in every piece of clothing she could find, was an 11-year-old girl. She was alive. Her name was. Her parents had been agricultural scientists, working in that same dome when the collapse began. They had died in the first hour when the heating system failed, had been in a separate section, checking on plant samples. When the alarm started, she had run for the emergency shelter. The shelter systems had failed too, but instead of dying, had done something incredible. She had taken apart the broken equipment in the shelter. Using pieces of heating units, water recyclers, and emergency batteries, she had built her own survival system. It was not pretty, it was not efficient, but it worked. For 19 days had lived alone in that small room. She rationed her food. She collected condensation for water. She slept in short periods, waking up every few hours to check her machines. She talked to herself to stay sane. She exercised to stay warm. When the rescue team found her, she was weak and thin, but she was alive. She walked out of that dome on her own 2 feet. She was the only survivor of the collapse. Leaned back in his chair and rubbed his eyes. He had seen many things in his long career. He had trained soldiers who had survived impossible battles. He had worked with aliens who had crawled out of death pits on their home worlds. But this girl, this small human who had survived alone at 11 years old, was something special. The Miracle Protocol had been created specifically for her. The idea was simple. Survivors had already experienced too much trauma. They had already proven their will to live. The galaxy owed them a peaceful existence, not more violence and danger. So the Miracle Protocol gave them safe positions, desk work, administrative roles, anything but combat. Had been in the protocol for 13 years. She had studied. She had worked. She had lived a quiet life on a space station far from anything dangerous. And then some idiot in processing had put her name on the wrong list. Pulled up the transfer request form. It would be easy. One signature, and she would be moved to the administrative training program where she belonged. She would never have to see the Predator class again. His finger hovered over the confirmation button. Then he stopped. Something in her file had caught his attention. A small note at the bottom, flagged by the Academy's artificial intelligence system. Subject displays adaptive survival instinct, rated 94th percentile across all tested species. Read the note again. Then he started looking through her other records. Her psychological evaluation was clean. No major trauma responses. No dangerous behaviors. The doctors had been amazed by how well she had adjusted to normal life after 3. Her physical scores were surprising. She was small and did not look strong, but her endurance tests were excellent. Her pain tolerance was in the top 5% of all human cadets. Her ability to function under stress was remarkable. And there was more. During her years in the protocol, she had taken extra classes: engineering, chemistry, biology, survival training, things she did not need for her administrative position, things she had learned on her own time for her own reasons. Thought about the girl he had seen today, the way she had stood in front of 12 predators without running, the way her voice had stayed calm even when she was clearly terrified. Most people, when faced with that kind of danger, either ran or froze, fight, flight, or freeze. Those were the basic responses, but had done something different. She had stayed still. She had observed. She had waited. Just like she had done in that agricultural dome 13 years ago. Closed the transfer request without signing it. He would give her 1 week. The next morning, woke up in her guest quarters expecting to find transfer orders. Instead, she found a message on her tablet from Instructor. Report to Training Hall 9 Black at 600 hours. Standard combat uniform. Do not be late. Read the message 3 times. Then she got dressed and walked to the training hall. The Predator class was already assembled when she arrived. 12 pairs of alien eyes turned to watch her enter. Some of them looked amused. Some looked annoyed. The large named watched her with those cold yellow eyes, a slight smile on his scaled face. Instructor stood at the front of the room, his arms crossed over his chest. "Cadet," he said, "you are late by 30 seconds. "I apologize, sir." "Do not apologize, just do better." He turned to address the whole room. "The administrative situation has been resolved. Cadet will be remaining with the Predator class for a trial period of 1 week. The room filled with sounds, growls, hisses, clicking noises that did not understand. None of them sounded happy. "Sir," said one of them, his deep voice rumbling like thunder, "with respect, this is unacceptable. The Predator class has standards. We cannot be slowed down by someone who does not belong here." "I agree," said one of them. Heat rippled off her skin as she spoke. "This is not a place for the weak. She will get herself killed. Or worse, she will get one of us killed." Held up his hand for silence. "I understand your concerns, but the decision has been made. Cadet will participate in all training exercises this week. At the end of the week, I will evaluate her performance. If she fails to meet minimum standards, she will be transferred. If she meets the standards, she stays." Made a low rumbling sound. "And if she dies during training?" "Then she dies," said simply. "That is the risk every member of this class accepts." Felt the weight of those words. She looked around the room at the creatures who would be training with her. They were bigger than her, stronger than her, faster than her. Every single one of them could kill her without effort. But she had faced death before. She had looked at it directly, felt its cold breath on her skin, and survived. "I understand, sir," she said. "I am ready." Laughed, a sound like rocks falling down a mountain. "Ready? Little human, you do not even know what you are ready for." Began the day's training session. It started with basic combat exercises, hand-to-hand fighting techniques, weapons handling, movement drills. Watched carefully as the other cadets demonstrated their skills. They moved with liquid grace, their blade fingers cutting through training dummies like paper. They were slower but devastating, each punch sending shockwaves through the air. They burned everything they touched, leaving scorch marks on the floor. When her turn came, performed the exercises as best she could. Her punches were weak compared to the aliens. Her movements were slow. She could not cut through dummies or burn holes in walls. The Predator class watched her with expressions ranging from boredom to contempt. But noticed something. While everyone was watching her fail at the physical exercises, no one was watching her watch them. She memorized how favored his left side when he moved. She noted that Myra, generated extra heat through her palms when she was stressed. She observed that they always positioned themselves in pairs, covering each other's blind spots. Weaknesses, patterns, habits. Things that could be exploited. At the end of the day, was exhausted and covered in bruises. She had failed almost every physical test. The other cadets had laughed at her, had called her prey 3 more times. But as she walked back to her quarters that night, she was not defeated. She was thinking. On 3, she had survived by being smart, by observing, by finding solutions that no one else would think of. The Predator class expected her to fail because she could not fight like them. They did not understand that fighting was not the only way to survive. In her quarters, opened her tablet and started taking notes. She wrote down everything she had observed about her classmates, their movements, their behaviors, their weaknesses. Then she started planning. She had 1 week to prove herself, 1 week to show these predators that humans were not prey, 1 week to survive. And had spent her whole life learning how to survive. The 5th day of trial period began with an announcement that made her blood run cold. "Elimination drill," Instructor said, his voice echoing through Training Hall 9 Black. "Today you will be tested in Training Zone 12. It is a simulated jungle environment covering approximately 4 square kilometers. There are no rules except one." He paused, looking at each cadet in turn. "Last one standing passes. Everyone else runs supplementary conditioning for 72 hours. No sleep, no rest, just pain." The Predator class responded with eager sounds, growls of excitement, clicking noises that sounded like anticipation. The skin glowed brighter with barely controlled energy. Said nothing. Her face was calm, but inside her mind was racing. For 4 days she had watched her classmates train. She had failed every physical test they threw at her. She was the weakest fighter, the slowest runner, the easiest target. The other cadets had stopped taking her seriously after the first day. That was exactly what she wanted. Led them to Training Zone 12. The doors opened onto a world of green darkness. Massive trees rose toward a ceiling that was hidden in artificial mist. Strange plants covered the ground, some of them glowing faintly with bioluminescence. The air was thick and humid, filled with the sounds of insects and distant animal calls. It looked like a real jungle. It felt like a real jungle. It was designed to test hunters in their natural environment. "You have 3 hours," said. "Eliminate your opponents by removing their identification tags." He pointed to the small metal badges attached to each cadet's collar. "If your tag is removed, you are eliminated. If you are the last one with your tag intact, you win." Cracked his neck, his blade fingers extending slightly. Finally, real training. Myra was already warming up, heat waves rippling off her body. "I have not had a proper hunt in months." Looked directly at, "Cadet, do you understand the rules?" "Yes, sir." "Do you have any questions?" Thought for a moment. "Sir, are we allowed to use the plants and materials in the environment?" Some of the predators laughed, shook his massive head. "She wants to know if she can throw leaves at us." But did not laugh. He studied with those careful eyes. "You may use anything you find in the training zone," he said. "There are no restrictions on tactics." "Thank you, sir." Raised his hand. "The drill begins on my signal. 3, 2, 1, hunt." The predator class exploded into motion. They vanished into the trees like shadows, moving with impossible speed despite their size. They charged in pairs, crashing through the undergrowth like living tanks. They leaped upward, using their heat to propel themselves into the canopy. The other aliens scattered in different directions, each following their own predator instincts. Within seconds, was alone at the entrance. She did not run, she did not hide. She knelt down and started examining the plants. For 4 days, she had studied more than just her classmates. Every night, she had used her tablet to research the flora in Training Zone 12. The Academy's database had detailed information about every plant, every creature, every environmental feature in the simulated jungle. Most of it was harmless, decorative, designed to make the environment feel real. But some of it was not. Found what she was looking for within minutes: a small purple flower growing near a fallen log. The database called it lily. It was mildly poisonous to most species, causing nausea and weakness. But that was only if you ate it. Did not eat it. She crushed the petals between her fingers and mixed them with water from a nearby stream. The result was a thin purple paste that had very different properties when absorbed through the skin. She kept moving, collecting more plants as she went. A yellow moss that caused temporary paralysis in, a red fungus that disrupted the heat regulation of, gray berries that affected the nervous systems of. 4 days of watching, 4 days of learning which species had which weaknesses. Now she had weapons that were made specifically for each of her opponents. As she worked, the sounds of battle echoed through the jungle: crashes, roars, bursts of flame. The predator class was hunting each other with savage enthusiasm. 1 hour passed. The first eliminations came through the training zone speaker system. Cadet Torin eliminated. Cadet Vex eliminated. Kept working. She did not try to hide her presence. She moved openly through the jungle, leaving obvious tracks making noise. She wanted them to know where she was. 2 hours passed, more eliminations. Cadet eliminated. Cadet Boke eliminated. Cadet Shen eliminated. The number of active hunters was shrinking. Soon, the survivors would start looking for easier targets. Soon, they would come for her. Found a small clearing and sat down in the center of it. She crossed her legs and waited. Her heart was beating fast, but her hands were steady. Around the clearing, hidden in the grass and leaves and branches, she had placed her preparations. Thin layers of paste on rocks where predators might rest their hands, coating on vines that nervous hunters might grab, residue on the ground where heavy feet would step. She did not have to fight them. She just had to touch them. 30 minutes before the end of the drill, they came. Emerged from the trees first. His scales were scratched and dirty from battle, but his yellow eyes were bright with triumph. He had 3 extra tags hanging from his belt, trophies from eliminated opponents. Behind him came Myra, her skin glowing hot from recent combat. 2 named and followed, still moving in their protective pair formation. 4 predators, the strongest survivors, coming for the weakest prey. Stopped at the edge of the clearing and tilted his head. "You are not running, little human." Looked up at him calmly. "No point, you are faster than me, stronger too." "Then you accept death." "No," smiled slightly. It was a small smile, but there was something in it that made pause. "I just needed you close enough." His eyes narrowed. Close enough for what? The answer came before could speak. Myra stumbled first. Grabbed at a low branch to steady herself, and her palm landed directly on a patch of red fungus residue. Within seconds, her skin started flickering. The heat that normally flowed through her body became chaotic, surging and dying unpredictably. "What is this?" she gasped. "What did you do?" The 2 went down next. Had stepped on a rock covered in gray berry paste. Had touched the same rock when he tried to help his partner. Both of them collapsed as their muscles stopped responding to their brains. Spun toward, his blade fingers extending fully, but his movement was wrong, unbalanced. His left arm, the one he always favored, was not responding properly. The yellow moss compound was already in his system. He had absorbed it through a vine he grabbed during his dramatic entrance to the clearing. "You," he growled, trying to step forward. His legs shook. "You poisoned us." "Not poison," said, standing up slowly. "Paralytic compounds. They will wear off in a few hours. No permanent damage." She walked toward as the massive struggled to stay upright. His blade fingers twitched uselessly at his sides. His yellow eyes, usually so cold and predatory, were wide with something that might have been shock. Or might have been fear. Reached up and removed the tag from his collar. Then she collected the tags from the others, one by one. "On 3, she said quietly, standing over his fallen form. "We did not have claws or armor or fire. We had patience. And we learned that everything has a weakness you can exploit if you are willing to wait long enough to find it." His jaw worked trying to form words. How did you know?" "I watched you for 4 days, all of you. I watched how you move, what you touch, where you step." Clipped the tags to her belt. "You were so busy looking at me like prey that you never noticed I was studying you like predators." She paused at the edge of the clearing and looked back at the 4 fallen hunters. "Thank you for the hunt." Then she walked away into the jungle. The drill ended 15 minutes later. The speaker system crackled with the final announcement. "Drill complete. Winner cadet, all tags collected." Instructor was waiting at the entrance to Training Zone 12. When walked out of the jungle, dirty and tired but completely unharmed, he did not say anything at first. He just looked at the tags hanging from her belt, 12 of them, every single one. "Cadet," he said finally, "report." Straightened her back. "Sir, I used environmental resources to create species-specific paralytic compounds. I applied them to surfaces throughout the training zone, targeting locations where specific individuals were likely to make contact. When the final hunters came for me, they had already been exposed to the compounds." Nodded slowly. "And how did you know which compounds would affect which species?" "Research, sir. The Academy database has detailed biological information on all enrolled species. I cross-referenced this with the botanical database for Training Zone 12. She paused. I also observed my classmates during the past 4 days. Everyone has patterns, habits, places they like to touch, ways they like to move. I just used that information. Was silent for a long moment. Behind him, the recovery team was carrying the paralyzed predator class out of the jungle, was glaring at as he was loaded onto a transport stretcher. Cadet said, "In 30 years of running this program, no one has ever completed an elimination drill without engaging in direct combat." "I apologize, sir. Was that against the rules?" The corner of his mouth twitched. It might have been anger. It might have been something else. "No," he said. "There are no rules in the predator class except survival." He turned and started walking back toward the main building. "Your trial period is over, cadet. Report to the barracks with the rest of your class tomorrow morning. You have earned your place." Watched him go. Then she looked at the 12 tags in her hand. She had proven herself. She had shown them that humans were not prey. But she knew this was only the beginning. The predator class would not forget what happened today. Some of them would respect her. Some of them would hate her. All of them would be watching her more carefully now. That was fine. Had spent her whole life being watched. She knew how to survive under pressure. And now, for the first time since 3, she felt like she was exactly where she was supposed to be. The mess hall fell completely silent when walked in. It was lunchtime, 2 days after the elimination drill. The large room was filled with cadets from different programs, eating their meals and talking about training. But when stepped through the door, every conversation stopped. Hundreds of eyes turned to look at her. Word had spread quickly through the academy. The small human girl who had defeated the entire predator class without throwing a single punch. The Miracle Protocol survivor who had paralyzed 12 apex hunters using nothing but plants and patience. The story sounded impossible, but it was true. Got her food and looked for a place to sit. The tables around her were either full or suddenly became full as cadets moved to avoid being near her. She was not sure if they were afraid of her or just did not want to be associated with her. Either way, she understood. She was used to being alone. But then she noticed something unexpected. At the far end of the mess hall, at a table reserved for the predator class, 12 familiar figures were watching her. Was there, his yellow eyes fixed on her face. Myra sat beside him, her skin glowing faintly. The two were eating their meals but kept glancing in her direction. Raised one blade-fingered hand and gestured for her to come over. Hesitated. Walking into the middle of the predator class felt like walking into a pit of snakes, but refusing the invitation would be worse. It would look like weakness, and in the predator class, weakness got you killed. She crossed the mess hall and stopped at the edge of their table. "You wanted to see me." Looked at the empty seat across from him. "Sit." Sat. For a long moment, no one spoke. The predators watched her with expressions she could not read. Some of them looked curious. Some looked angry. Myra's skin was glowing brighter than usual, heat waves rippling off her body in visible patterns. Finally broke the silence. "I have been thinking about what you did in the jungle," he said slowly. His voice was deep and rumbling like stones grinding together. "At first, I was angry. I wanted to tear you apart for humiliating me." Kept her face calm. "I understand. But then I started thinking about how you did it." Leaned forward, his massive arms resting on the table. "You knew exactly which compound would affect which species. You knew where we would step, what we would touch. You planned everything days in advance." "Yes." "How did you know the compounds would work on all of us at the same time?" Considered the question carefully. Everyone at the table was listening. This was a test of some kind, though she was not sure what kind. "I did not know," she admitted. "I made different compounds for different species, applied them to different surfaces based on who I thought would touch what." The larger of the two made a sound of disbelief. "That is insane. You bet your survival on guessing. No, I bet it on observation. Met his gaze steadily. You always move in pairs with, you always take positions on his left side to cover his weak eye. When you entered the clearing, I knew you would both go to the same rock for cover. His jaw dropped slightly. He turned to look at who looked equally surprised. And me, Myra asked. Her voice was sharp, challenging. How did you know I would grab that branch? Generate heat through their palms when stressed. After 2 hours of combat, your body temperature was elevated. I watched you during training all week. When you get too hot, you instinctively reach for the coolest surface nearby. Shrugged. The branch I prepared was in shade. It was the coolest thing within your reach. Myra stared at her for a long moment. Then she let out a short, barking laugh. She profiled us, she said to the others. This little human profiled all of us like we were test subjects. Humans do not guess, said quietly. We calculate, we watch, we learn, and then we act. The table was silent again, but the silence felt different now. Less hostile, more thoughtful. Sat back in his chair, his blade fingers tapping against the table's surface. On my home world, we have a saying. The strongest hunter is not always the one with the sharpest claws. It is the one who understands its prey. We have a similar saying on Earth, replied. Know your enemy. Is that what we are to you, enemies? Thought about the question. 2 days ago, she would have said yes. These creatures had looked at her like food. They had laughed at her weakness. They had expected her to fail. But things had changed. No, she said finally. You are my classmates, my squad, the people I will work with and fight beside. I do not want you to be my enemies. Studied her face for a long moment. Then he made that low, rumbling sound again, the one that might have been a laugh. You are strange, little human, very strange. He reached across the table and pushed a tray of food toward her. Eat. You are too thin. How do you expect to survive if you do not eat? It was not friendship, not exactly, but it was something, an acknowledgement, a beginning. Ate with the Predator class for the first time. Over the following weeks, things began to change. The Predators stopped treating like prey. They did not treat her like an equal either, not yet, but they watched her differently now, with curiosity instead of contempt, with interest instead of dismissal. During training exercises, they started asking for her input. At first it was small things. Which route should they take through a building? Where might enemies be hiding? What were the best positions for an ambush? Answered their questions with the same careful observation she had used in the jungle. She noticed things they missed, patterns they overlooked, weaknesses in their opponents that their predator instincts had not caught. And slowly, the Predator class began to understand something important. Humans were not weak, they were different. Instructor watched all of this from his command center. He reviewed the training recordings every night, watching how interacted with her squad, how they responded to her, how they changed. One evening, after a particularly successful tactical exercise, he called to his office. She stood at attention in front of his desk, waiting for him to speak. The old instructor was looking at a screen filled with performance data. Cadet, he said finally, do you know what makes the Predator class special? Sorry. Our cadets are selected from the deadliest species in the galaxy, apex hunters, natural killers. He turned the screen to show her. Their individual combat scores are among the highest in the academy. In direct confrontation, they have no equals. Nodded, she had seen this herself. In pure fighting ability, her classmates were terrifying. But look at their team exercise scores, pointed to a different set of numbers. Before you arrived, they were average at best, sometimes below average. This surprised. I do not understand, sir. They are all excellent fighters. That is the problem, sat back in his chair. They are hunters, predators. They think like individuals. They compete with each other even when they should cooperate. Put 12 apex hunters in a room and tell them to work together, and they spend half their time establishing dominance instead of completing objectives. He looked with something like respect in his eyes. But since you joined the class, their team scores have improved by 34%. Blinked how? You tell me, cadet, what have you been doing differently? Thought about the past few weeks, the questions her classmates asked her, the suggestions she made during exercises, the way she positioned herself in the group, not as a leader but as something else, something different. I do not try to compete with them, she said slowly. I cannot win in direct confrontation, so I focus on other things: planning, observation, finding the best way to use everyone's strengths. Nodded. You think like a human. Sir, humans are not apex hunters. Your species evolved differently. You survived not by being the strongest or the fastest, but by working together, by finding ways to overcome challenges that should have been impossible. He leaned forward. You think in terms of the group. You find solutions that benefit everyone. That is something predators do not do naturally. Understood now. She had been doing what came naturally to her as a human, planning ahead, considering everyone's abilities, finding the approach that maximized their chances of success. To her, it was just common sense, but to her predator classmates, it was a completely new way of thinking. Cadet said, I am promoting you to squad leader. His heart stopped. Sir, I am not qualified. I am the worst fighter in the class. You are the worst fighter, agreed. But you are the best leader, and in real combat, good leadership matters more than individual skill. He stood up and walked around his desk to stand in front of her. The Predator class has always produced excellent individual operators, but we have struggled to produce cohesive teams. Your species' way of thinking, your ability to see the big picture and coordinate different abilities, is exactly what this class needs. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small metal badge. It was shaped like a claw, the symbol of the Predator class, but with a single star added below it. Do you accept this responsibility, cadet? Looked at the badge. She thought about everything she had survived. 3. The jungle drill, the weeks of training with creatures who could kill her without effort. She had come so far. And now she was being asked to go further. Yes, sir, she said, I accept. Pinned the badge to her uniform. Then go tell your squad they are waiting in the barracks. Saluted and turned to leave, but she stopped at the door. Sir, may I ask one question? What is it? When you decided to keep me in the Predator class instead of transferring me out, why did you do it? Was quiet for a moment. When he spoke, his voice was softer than usual. Because I read your file, cadet. I read about what you did on 3, how you survived alone at 11 years old, building your own life support from scrap. He shook his head slowly. Anyone can be taught to fight, but that kind of survival instinct, that ability to adapt and overcome impossible situations, that cannot be taught. You either have it or you do not. He met her eyes with a look that was almost gentle. You have it, cadet. You have had it your whole life. I just gave you a place where you could use it. Did not know what to say, so she simply nodded and walked out of the office. The barracks were loud when she arrived. The Predator class was gathered around a screen, watching something and arguing about it, but they stopped when she walked in. Noticed the new badge on her uniform first. His yellow eyes widened slightly. Squad leader, he said. The little human is squad leader. The room went quiet. Everyone was waiting to see what she would say. Stood straight and faced her squad. I am not the strongest fighter here. I am not the fastest or the deadliest. If we ever have to fight one-on-one, any of you could kill me easily. No one disagreed. It was simple truth. But I see things you do not see. I think in ways you do not think. And I survived things that should have killed me just like all of you. She looked around the room at the predators who had become her classmates, her squad. If you follow my lead, I will use everything I am to make sure we succeed, to make sure we all survive." The room was silent for a long moment, then stood up. He walked over to and looked down at her with those cold, yellow eyes. "On my world," he said slowly, "we follow the strongest hunter. That has always been our way." Held his gaze, she did not back down. His mouth curved into something that might have been a smile. "But you have shown me that there is more than one kind of strength." He placed one massive hand on her shoulder, careful not to cut her with his blade fingers. "I will follow you, squad leader." One by one the others stood up. Myra, the others whose names had learned over the past weeks. All of them standing with her. "Thank you," said quietly. "I will not let you down." The Predator class had found its leader. And for the first time in Academy history, that leader was human. 3 months after became squad leader, the call came. Predator Squad 7 had its first real mission. A diplomatic vessel called the Dawn of Peace had been captured by Marauders, a group of pirates who operated in the lawless space between star systems. They were vicious and unpredictable. They had a simple rule when taking ships: no survivors. 43 diplomats and crew members were being held hostage. If rescue did not come within 6 hours, they would all be executed. The regular military could not reach the ship in time. The only force close enough was the Galactic Military Academy training station, and the only team qualified for this kind of operation was the Predator class. Squad leader gathered her team in the briefing room. Instructor stood at the front, displaying tactical maps and intelligence reports on the main screen. "The Dawn of Peace was ambushed 12 hours ago," explained. "The Marauders disabled its engines and boarded with approximately 60 fighters. They are currently holding the hostages in the central cargo bay while they strip the ship of valuables." The screen showed the vessel's layout. It was a large ship, designed for comfort rather than combat. Multiple decks, dozens of rooms, and a maze of corridors connecting everything. "They have fortified the main approaches," continued. "They expect a direct assault from the military. They have set up defensive positions here, here, and here." He pointed to key on the map. "They have also rigged the lower decks with explosives. Any frontal attack will trigger these explosives and kill the hostages." Growled softly beside, "Then we cannot attack directly." "Correct, a standard assault is not possible." Looked at. "That is why we are sending you, squad leader. This mission requires creativity, not brute force." Studied the tactical map carefully. Her mind was already working, processing possibilities and discarding them one by one. The expected brute force. They had prepared for it. Their defenses were designed to stop exactly the kind of attack that predators would normally use, but was not going to give them what they expected. "Sir," she said, "I need access to the ship's ventilation system blueprints, and I need to know everything about the species, biology, behavior, weaknesses." Nodded. "You will have everything we know. You have 3 hours to plan before departure." The next 3 hours were the most intense of his life. She spread maps and data across the briefing room table. Her squad gathered around her. She asked questions, made notes, rejected ideas and developed new ones. Her classmates watched her work with a mixture of respect and amazement. This was what humans did. They planned, they calculated, they found the path that no one else could see. Finally, looked up at her squad. "I have a plan." She explained it to them. It was complex. It was risky. It required perfect timing and coordination. It was exactly the kind of plan that predators would never think of. "We are not going to assault the ship," said. "We are going to infest it." The Predator squad deployed in a small stealth shuttle, approaching the Dawn of Peace from an angle that the sensors would not detect. Sat in the command seat, reviewing the final details of her plan while her squad prepared their equipment. Dropped into the seat beside her. His yellow eyes were calm, focused. "This plan of yours," he said quietly, "it is unlike anything I have ever seen." "Is that a problem?" "No," the corner of his scaled mouth twitched. "It is why I follow you, squad leader. You see paths that my eyes cannot find." The shuttle reached the dawn of peace and attached to an unused airlock on the ship's lower section. One by one, the squad slipped inside. The plan was simple in concept but complex in execution. Had identified 17 points in the ship's ventilation system where her squad could infiltrate simultaneously. Instead of fighting their way through defended corridors, they would spread through the ship like a disease. Silent, invisible, deadly. But the first phase was not about combat, it was about preparation. Had spent part of her 3 hours creating a special compound. Not a paralytic this time, but a hallucinogen. Something that would affect the nervous system and make them see things that were not real. The compound was delivered through the ventilation system. Within minutes, it had spread to every part of the ship. In the cargo bay, the marauders started seeing things. Shadows moved in the corners. Enemies appeared and disappeared. Sounds echoed from everywhere and nowhere. They opened fire on empty air. "Now," said into her communication device. 17 hatches opened simultaneously. 17 predators dropped from the ceiling, the walls, the floors. They were already confused, already shooting at phantoms. They did not see the real attackers until it was too late. Moved through the corridors like a living shadow, his blade fingers cutting through fighters before they even knew he was there. Myra burned hot and bright, her thermal attacks devastating enemies who were too busy shooting at hallucinations to defend themselves, and worked in their perfect pair formation, crushing any who tried to mount organized resistance. Moved with them, not fighting but directing. She saw the battlefield as a whole, coordinating her squad through their communication devices. 3 enemies approaching from your left. Myra, cover the corridor behind. There is a group trying to reach the explosive triggers, intercept them now. Her squad responded instantly to every command. They trusted her completely. They knew that she saw things they could not see. The battle was fast and brutal. They had prepared for a military assault. They had not prepared for this, for enemies who appeared from everywhere, for a commander who knew exactly where they were and where they would go. 18 minutes after the operation began, walked into the cargo bay. The hostages were huddled against the far wall, frightened but unharmed. Bodies of fighters lay scattered across the floor. Stood in the center of the room, his scales splattered with alien blood, his yellow eyes bright with the thrill of the hunt. "Mission complete, squad leader," he reported. "0 casualties, all hostages recovered." Let out a breath she had not realized she was holding. "Good work, everyone. Begin extraction procedures." The rescue shuttles arrived within the hour. Military officers took control of the scene, securing the captured and evacuating the hostages. Medical teams checked everyone for injuries. One of the diplomats, an elderly human woman with silver hair, approached as she was overseeing the extraction. "You are the one who planned this rescue?" the woman asked. "I am the squad leader, yes." The woman looked at the Predator squad, at the massive aliens who were following the orders of a small human girl. Her eyes were wide with something that might have been awe. "They told me the military would be too far away. They told me we would die." Tears were forming in her eyes. "How did you do it? How did you defeat them so quickly?" Thought about the question. How could she explain what had happened? How could she describe the years of survival, the weeks of observation, the hours of planning that had led to this moment? In the end, she said something simple. "I am human, ma'am. This is what we do." The mission report reached the highest levels of the Galactic Military Command. Officers who had never heard of the Predator class suddenly became very interested in its activities. The story spread quickly through military channels. A human squad leader had coordinated 12 apex predators in a perfect rescue operation. 0 casualties. Complete success. Against odds that should have been impossible. Instructor received the report in his office. He read through every detail, every tactical decision, every outcome. When he finished, he leaned back in his chair and let out a long breath. He thought about the paperwork error that had dropped into his class 3 months ago. He thought about the girl who had stood in front of 12 predators on her first day, refusing to run. He pulled up her file and added a personal note at the bottom. The paperwork error was the best mistake we ever made. Then he submitted his recommendation for his promotion to permanent rank. Years passed. Rose through the ranks of the galactic military, always serving with her predator squad, remained by her side as her second-in-command. Myra became the squad's infiltration specialist and continued their perfect partnership. They fought in campaigns across the galaxy. They completed missions that others said were impossible. They saved lives that others had given up as lost. And always the small human woman led them, not through strength, not through speed, but through something that only humans seem to possess. The ability to see the whole picture, to plan beyond the moment, to find solutions that no one else could imagine. The Galactic Military Academy eventually updated its recruitment materials. A new section was added to the briefing on human capabilities. Do not mistake human fragility for weakness. Their species survived extinction-level events not through strength, but through an unparalleled capacity for adaptation. Where predators see prey, humans see puzzles. Where hunters see weakness, humans find opportunity. The most dangerous creature in the galaxy is not the one with the sharpest claws. It is the one who survives long enough to learn yours. In the margins of the document, someone had written a handwritten note. The handwriting was shaky, the letters uneven. It was penned by Instructor himself, shortly before his retirement. I spent 30 years training predators. I thought I knew what made a warrior. Then a small human girl showed me that the deadliest weapon in the galaxy is not a claw or a blade. It is a mind that refuses to give up. Train them well, they will surprise you. Never saw the note, but she did not need to. She had already proven its truth 1,000 times over. And somewhere, in the stars above a frozen world called 3, a 11-year-old girl had planted the seeds of everything that followed. Survival was not just about living through the moment. It was about becoming something that the universe could not break. Had become that something. And the galaxy would never forget it.